how old were you?
Like 15.
Wow, and you were earning money by building websites?
I remember I had enough savings to survive until April. And I said to myself, like, okay, if I can pull that off, I will stay in Japan. But if I can't, then okay, I need to ask my parents for a ticket back home. I was looking for something more, right, in life. So I moved to Lanzarote and tried to focus more on like self-development.
But then ultimately you decided, okay, let's go to London.
Yeah, so after the visa extension, so she couldn't stay more. I decided to stay a few more months to at least close 1 year in London. After that, I came to Japan. It was very, very hard. I think that was the biggest difficulty, right? The language barrier.
First year you had the education visa, so you didn't need to worry about that. But then it was a question of how do I stay in Japan? Welcome to the Japan Dev Podcast. I'm Eric, founder of JapanDev.com, and today I am super excited to be sitting down with Kamil, who is a software engineer from Poland, who's been working now in Japan for over 10 years, and he has done a whole bunch of different things here, from being a software engineer to working as a manager, managing teams of engineers, and now he's actually running a business full-time. So it's a fascinating story. I think there's going to be a lot of insights that we can glean from it, and I'm super excited to kind of jump into this discussion. So welcome, Kamil.
Thank you for a great introduction. Well, yes, it has been a wild ride until now.
It always is.
Yeah, Japan is a great place to be, but it comes with some unique set of problems how to get here and stay here. So I hope we can dive a little bit more into that.
Oh, I would love to dive into all of that. But I think just to start off, do you think you could just give like a super quick, I guess, self-intro and maybe just let us know how you were first exposed to Japan and realized that it was something that you were kind of interested in?
Sure. It started probably like around primary school. I'm originally from Poland, right? So we had this one TV channel which started playing some Japanese anime. Right, and I got interested into that. It was just right at the time when I was coming back from school, and all my friends was watching that. We were kind of like growing up on that content, I would say. So that was like the first exposure. Then there was not much more, and then it came back like during university. My university was partially funded by one of Japanese organizations, sponsored by government, I think, and Polish professors. It was some kind of like joint venture private school. It was at the time the best private tech university in Poland. Yeah, when I joined, like there was a lot of like equipment, like from Fujitsu and stuff. We had like small supercomputer, right? At the time, it was like multi CPU stuff and a lot of cool stuff, like which other universities didn't have. So yeah, that was kind of exciting and another exposure to Japan. Yeah.
Wow. So it started with anime, just after school cartoons, basically. And you saw, like, were you aware that they were like from Japan, and did that cause you to think about like the country and potentially living there someday? Like was that in the back of your mind, or was it just pure?
At the time, I wasn't aware at all. I just liked some of those, right? I saw some like documentaries about Japan, and that was actually also kind of interesting. And then I realized like, oh, this is like another country, and it's very unique and different than what we are seeing around.
Yeah, so I was also very interested when I was looking at your LinkedIn to see this experience at the Polish-Japanese Academy of Information Technology. I, for one thing, didn't really know that that existed. I didn't even know that there was kind of this shared experience that you could have where it was like a Japanese environment somewhat, or at least like had some relation to Japan, but despite being in Poland. And I guess there was like a relationship between the two countries during that time. What led you to choose that school for university? Was it mainly just because, as you said, it was like kind of the top school and it happened to be Japanese? Or was it like partially a way to try to get to learn more about Japan? Or what was the thinking behind choosing it?
Sure. So it's funny story. When I was in the middle school, I was climbing a lot, like going to like bouldering and climbing the rock, like doing a lot of rock climbing. 2 or 3 of my friends who I was climbing with, one was actually teaching at this university. The other one was attending, and the other, I think, just ended, right? So I was all the time like exposed to this environment, and it was like easy choice for me. Like, okay, I just asked my parents, can I go there? Like, it's a little bit expensive, but can we afford that? They said yes,
Mm,
and I applied and
mm.
passed the exams, and yeah.
Wow. So it was mostly just because you thought of it as being a good university and you knew some people who were involved with it, and it seemed like the right kind of fit for you. It wasn't like, oh, it's a door to Japan or anything like that.
At the time, no, I wasn't even thinking about traveling to Japan, right? Like, it
Mm,
was just that those people I was hanging out with, they were very happy with, like, really recommending me to actually go there because it was
mm.
like good university. They had like best teachers from all the like government universities as well, polytechnic and so on. So yeah, it was good environment for studying.
Wow. So were you already pretty into like programming or just kind of interested in computers or like where kind of were you in your tech, like the tech side of your journey?
I got really interested into computers like very early on. Maybe like during primary school, I was already like my uncle was helping me to compile the Linux kernel on my machine. So I was
Wow.
starting with like Red Hat 3. So that's
Wow.
pretty long story. And then like during last years of primary school, I was making like first commercial websites, right? So my parents were very surprised that why those business people are coming to our house and you know
Yeah.
what they want from you.
Wow.
But yeah, it was like my first paid gigs actually to make some websites when like internet was just starting in Poland. Yeah,
How old were you?
like 15.
Wow. And you were earning money by
Yeah.
building websites?
Yeah. For first website
Wow.
I built, I remember I bought first like decent bicycle. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So you were already pretty deep into like the tech side of things, and you maybe
yeah,
asked yourself, what is the best technical university I can go to really, build my skills more? And the answer was this Polish Japanese academy. So you got in, and then I guess so you had the experience of mainly studying essentially computer science. And did you do like a study abroad or anything like that? Because I know it has a lot of opportunities for that type of thing, but was that part of your experience or no?
No. There were some programs to like internship in Japan, I remember, and some
Mm,
people took it. There was like Erasmus program as well. At that time, my family had like different priorities, and
mm,
my school already was quite expensive. So, they told me like, okay, if you make the money, you can go. But the first 3 years of university were like pretty tough. Like that, it's like really packed with content, a lot of mathematics and stuff like that.
mm.
So while programming I considered pretty easy, like more advanced mathematics is not. At least it wasn't for me. So I needed to spend a little bit more time to study it. I was just trying to not fall behind with everything what was happening. I started working
Wow.
like pretty early during university, and I think this way I kind of started getting more experience than like just through my studies.
Ah, I see. Working as like a professional software engineer essentially while studying.
Yes. After first year, during summer, I started working for one like small company, not very far from that university. They had like e-commerce platform and were selling like office supplies. And there was one other guy who was like much more experienced than me at the time, and he like set up the whole system for them, but it was
Mhm.
very scrappy.
Right.
So I needed to like put it more in order and build like CRM and other stuff for them, and
Mm.
yeah, I did that, and they were very happy, and yeah, that was
Wow.
that was the beginning.
That's awesome. That is a great way to do it. Get some actual work experience while you are still studying. And I'm sure that that made it so that you had potentially a lot of options then when you graduated. And so I guess maybe the Japan thing was still a little bit there in the back of your mind, maybe unconsciously, because even once you graduated, you didn't move to Japan yet.
Yeah.
You, I believe you started basically freelancing and at some point made your way over to Spain, right? So can you at least, I
Yeah.
mean, can you explain a little bit about basically what happened after you graduated and got your degree and how you started your career?
Sure. So with that first company, I spent like 1 year. Then I worked maybe half year for different one, and then I joined like interactive agency, and I found out later that it was one of the top agencies in Poland at
Wow.
the time. They were doing projects for banks, telecoms, multi-million dollar deals and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
For example, I was working on the project for Procter and Gamble, right? Like big internationals. So
Mhm.
that was really cool environment. It's like crazy intensive work, and like in any agency, I suppose. Very intensive, but at the same time, I learned a lot, right? And I spent with
Right.
them 3 years.
Okay, wait. So you
And
graduated from school and then stayed in Poland for a bit and worked with them for three
yeah,
years.
no, I started when I was still at the university. So
Oh,
maybe after graduation, I stayed with them like 1 year.
okay.
And then I decided, no, it's like I had enough of this corporate life.
Was it like long hours and kind of strict work kind of style, or like how? In what way was it intense? Would you say?
It was pretty fun. Like people were mostly great. The problem is the amount of stress associated with that work was insane. Right,
Mm,
so that there was always deadlines, and when you are always like late with your team, it's no fun place to
mm,
be. And
mm,
you have big clients asking like, oh, when it will be ready, right?
mm. I say. Did you have a sense of like, oh, this is $1 million+ contract with P&G or whoever? Like, and did that add to your stress as an engineer, or were you kind of insulated from that?
A little bit. Our
Mm.
project managers were even more stressed than us. I have the impression.
Right.
So yeah, when you are dealing with stressed people and then you are loaded with work as well, then it just adds up.
I say. Okay, so you did that for 3 years, and then what happened after that?
Then I finished working with them. I started freelancing. At some point, I decided with my girlfriend at the time that, okay, the winter is coming, and winters in Poland are not very nice, let's say. They're very, very cold. We decided, okay, let's go somewhere where it's nice weather. We'll prepare. We have like 3 months to prepare. And like 100 days later, we took the plane and went to Spain, to Tenerife, right?
Mm,
And at
mm,
that time, I had just few freelance clients, but I was also a little bit lucky because during that time, I found one client or he found me, a client from UK, with
mm,
who I worked for roughly 3 years remotely.
mm.
And at that time, remotely was, Skype and stuff, not like it looks right now. And then after 3 years, they invited me to join a big project in London, and I packed my suitcases again and went there.
Wow. So that's the Canary Islands, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was staying in Tenerife for
Uh-huh.
2.5 years, and then 1 year on Lanzarote Island.
Wow.
Yeah,
That sounds really cool. You were working remotely before it was cool to do that using Skype and probably a lot of other cobbled together kind of tools.
yeah.
It was probably a lot. I'm guessing there was a lot more friction in the kind of remote work style back then than there is now. But it's cool that you were able to do that. How come you decided to leave that situation and actually physically move to London?
Lanzarote, when I was at the time, was great place, and like from time perspective, maybe I wouldn't move back there right now, but at that time it was really good place where I could just learn new skills, in terms of like programming, business intelligence, and so on. I was
Mm,
studying that a lot. Just grow. I also wanted to change my environment from Tenerife, which was like more like party oriented, I would say.
mm,
So at some point, I thought like all my friends were just thinking about going to the party and drinking and this kind of stuff. So uh, I, I was looking for something more, right, in life. So I moved to
right.
Lanzarote and tried to focus more on like self development, I would
Mm,
say.
wow. But then ultimately you decided, okay, let's go to London.
Yeah,
There's got to be all kinds of very serious, career-oriented people there. So maybe
yeah,
that made sense, as like kind of the next step for your career,
yeah.
right?
Lanzarote is not a big island, and there's not too many like growth, like business opportunities if you are
Mm,
not in tourism, right?
mm,
If you want to do something in IT related, it's not the best place to be.
mm. Okay, so at this point, maybe Japan was still somewhere in the back of your mind, percolating somewhat, but still not really coming to the forefront at all. And you ultimately decided to go to the UK.
Yeah.
And I guess you continued working for kind of the same company that you were already doing some work for from overseas. So maybe it
Mhm.
wasn't too big of a difference, but were there any like kind of surprises or adjustments that you had to make when moving to the London area and kind of getting used to the kind of, I guess, tech scene there?
Like, for for my work, I was communicating all the time in English, right? But then
Right.
in London, you face a little bit different flavors of English.
Mm,
So that was sometimes funny that someone with very strong accent is saying something to me. It's in English, but I have no idea what they're saying, and
wow.
you feel stupid that you need to ask like, okay, can you repeat? Right.
Interesting.
So that,
Mm,
that that was kind of frustrating at the beginning, but later, like, I got
mm,
used to it, and it got only better. London is a great place to be. It's
mm,
fantastic city. The UK is of course changing right now, but I still love to visit it.
mm. Okay. So you enjoyed kind of living there, working as a software engineer. I guess what kind of actual projects were you doing at that point? Like, was it back end, front end, or like, what kind of development was it?
Mostly backend. It was the project related to like business intelligence. We were working on some reports which required analyzing like terabytes of data,
Mm,
and we are like migrating from one database to another, rewriting everything. It was very intellectually challenging,
mm,
but there was a lot of satisfaction from that work when something started to work. Actually, they had this one report which was taking like 24 hours to generate. It was
mm,
so huge amount of data, and at the
mm.
end when we finished, it was like I don't know, 3 hours, right?
Right.
So they could do 3 runs within one day, and
Wow.
yeah, the goal of the project has been achieved.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So, did you have to do any kind of like overtime work or anything like that, or was it like a pretty chill work style in the UK?
In the UK, most of the time there was no overwork. No,
Mm,
it
okay.
was just from time to time, no problems at all. We had some deadlines we needed to follow, right? But in general, my boss, the head of the company, was handling that very, very well. So didn't have any difficulties with that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I have a very positive image of the UK when it comes to the work style and everything. So I'm not surprised to hear that it was a pretty nice place to work. I know that they have plenty of vacation days and things like that. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure Poland probably does as well. I think that's pretty common across probably
Actually,
most of the EU, right? Or not so much?
I think Japan has more than Poland. To
Really?
be honest, yeah. In Poland, I think you will get like more vacation days from like your when you are working for the company. But in terms of like
Hmm.
national holidays, I think Japan has more.
Yeah, that is one sneaky way that Japan actually gives people, I think, more days off than people realize. There's, I believe, 16 public holidays here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but not
and
everyone is using that, right? Or can use that in different industries. So
I feel like that's really the big
yeah,
question when it comes to Japan is like the percentage of the days off that you actually use. There are pros and cons, I suppose, but that's interesting to hear, though. So you worked in London, I guess, for a few years, and I guess towards the end of that time in London, maybe this kind of influence that you had from the anime as a kid and maybe your university finally started to kind of come to the forefront of your mind, I'm assuming, because you made your way to Japan at some point. But how did that
yeah.
idea kind of come into your mind?
So while in London, I met my current wife. She was Japanese.
Uh,
So yeah, we started dating during that time. Actually, I spent in London just 1 year, right? So
oh, just,
during when I just came there, maybe she could stay like 4 months,
mm,
and after that, her visa ended, and she needed to go back to Japan. And it was she was already after the visa extension, so she couldn't stay more. I decided to stay few more months to at least close 1 year in London, right?
mm,
After that, I came to Japan. I decided that it's probably the best thing to do. I liked her, and at the same time, all those past experience, as you mentioned, surfaced that okay, maybe it's not a bad
mm,
place to stay for a while, at
mm.
least try,
Yeah.
right? I found a language school in Tokyo. It was insanely expensive at the time because I was paying like upfront for 1 year, and it was like in terms of the school, it was like full-time study
Mm,
program, right? So 5 days per week, every day it was around 5 hours of studying,
mm, mm.
so pretty intense.
Do you remember how much it was?
At the time, it was £8,000.
Okay, 8,000
or over
pounds.
that, like 8.5, something like that. So it took fair amount of my savings, and
So that was how you got the visa and
yes,
were able to actually come here. You, I guess, took maybe some time off because you said it was 5 days a week full time.
yeah.
So from working as a software engineer, you kind of focused on the language for about a year. Is that right?
Well, I was still working remotely to some extent, but not with
Okay.
the same company. They told me that, okay, if you want to go, go, but we'll stop the contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I hoped I could continue with them, but I think they had some contract constraints with that company they worked with, and
Mm.
they couldn't allow anyone to work remotely on that
Mm.
stuff. There was like very sensitive data they handled and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I came, I had maybe one client at the time because I just learned that, okay, I can't continue with that company, which I hope
Mm.
for.
Right.
So at that time I came in like 2014 November.
Mm.
I remember I had enough savings to survive until April. And I said to myself, like, okay, if I can pull that off, I will stay in Japan. But if I can't, then okay, might need to ask my parents for a ticket back home.
It's a common story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily I found some clients. They were late with payments, so it was an enormous amount of stress again. I needed to borrow money, but at the end of that month, like everything played out
Mm.
well, and I have enough money to finish the language school. And
Mm.
then I started contract or like partnership with one Japanese company. I partnered up with one guy,
Mm.
and we were building some project together, and that
Mm.
continued for a few years.
So that was maybe your next visa because the first year you had the education visa, so you didn't need to
Yes.
worry about that. But then it was a question of how do I stay in Japan? And you
Yeah.
said you found a partner. Were you able to create like a Japanese kind of business entity at that time? And like what visa did you get? Mm.
I got like employee engineer visa at that
Okay.
time. Yeah. The company was his, and being a like having full partnership wasn't even in question because it was like his client. He already was working with other people for them. We had agreement that he will share with me fair share from that project, right? So we
Wow.
started working like that, and it was okay for a few years.
That's awesome. So you were able to get an engineering visa sponsored through that company and
Yeah.
some sort of like, I mean, essentially profit share agreement where like
Hmm.
you were getting a piece of all the upside of the work that you were doing.
Yeah, yeah. At the time, the money was okay. It wasn't like extraordinary, I would say, but
Hmm.
I was making like I would say good software developer salary, right?
Hmm. That's awesome. And did you just work remotely or what was that kind of
Mostly
like? So you
remotely. Yeah,
hmm.
we had like meetings from time to time, but mostly working from home.
Wow. That's cool. And I'm curious, like at that point, had you done any research into like the IT industry in Japan? And did you have kind of a conception of what it would be like to maybe work at like a Japanese company? Yeah, had you maybe heard some of like the darker side of like Japan's tech industry? Like, had you heard the word karoshi or like quote unquote black company or anything like that? Or like, were you not aware of that at all?
I was reading, of course, right? And
Mm.
when you live here, you need to educate yourself like every day, right? Especially that you were not raised here. Yeah, of course. And at some point, I was looking for a change and I was looking for different companies, but finding job at that time when I had only 1 year of language school, language level was below N3, right?
Mm.
JLPT N3. So it wasn't enough to work like with in fully Japanese company.
Mm.
I needed to depend on like some English speaking. That was probably the major difficulty at the time. Now I think situation is a little bit better. There are
Mm.
more options. More companies are using English for their dev teams.
I
And
see.
I think there are more resources as well to find jobs. Like, for example,
Yeah,
yours,
Japan
your
Dev.
website. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. My first job I found about I think 11 years ago now, and it was a struggle. And I had to be pretty much using all the Japanese sites and that kind of thing. I think it's a lot easier now. There might also be a bit more competition, though. I'm not totally sure. I think there are probably some pros and cons. But that's interesting, though.
Mhm.
So you didn't have like kind of a sense of being kind of apprehensive, I guess, about working in Japan because it was like, oh, I hear they do all this overtime work and like it's not a good place to be as like an engineer. Like they don't respect software engineers or anything like that. It was more just like I'll find a place. I can work freelance if I want to. I can do whatever, and like I'm sure I'll be able to find like something that is like a decent environment for me.
Yeah, like in every country, you can find a work where the work environment won't be the best for you, right? So
Mm,
the same situation I think applies to Japan. The work culture
mm,
is definitely different, but I wouldn't say that every company is trying to drive their employees to the limit just for sake of the boss being happy.
mm.
So I heard about those companies, but I didn't experience that kind of company myself. I know it's like popular topic, and those kind of posts, for example, on Reddit rank very well.
Yes,
But I would say it's rather a margin than a general rule.
I totally agree. I think you only need one company, and it sounds like you found a pretty cool one with that guy that you knew, and you were able to get a visa through that and kind of get started
Yeah.
in your career, in your Japanese career here. So that's really cool. I think um, a lot of people are able to do similar things and completely avoid kind of the negative aspects of the work culture. So yeah, I'm glad to see another kind of example of that because that's what I'm always trying to tell people too. It's like, no, you just got to find one good company. They exist. Like
Yeah.
they're good, a good team, good company, whatever. So that, yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Mm,
Even in a certain company, if it's big, right? There are teams
mm,
which are good for you and maybe not so good for you. So, even sometimes internal transfer is enough to be happy, right? With
mm,
where you're
mm.
working.
That's so true, especially for the bigger companies. It can make a huge difference what team you're
Mhm.
on. So you were also living in Japan. And I don't know, were there any other kind of pitfalls and stuff that you ran into just getting used to life here? For example, like getting an apartment, trying to figure out how to get a bank account, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, with apartment, it's complicated. The options are more limited than for like Japanese people, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's still unfortunately reality. But there are so many options right now for foreigners, which are like foreigners friendly. I always were lucky to find either a share house or
Mm.
apartment. I think my first apartment was through like Sakura House or something like that.
Huh?
Though those come a little bit more expensive, but if you need just a place to start, that's a way to go, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then with time, you like just grow your, I would say, friend circle, and maybe some of those friends have friends who rent apartments or something like that, and you can find
Mm.
some really good like local deals, right? Yeah, but yeah, I know that can be challenging for some people. I would just go, build your network, try to get whatever is accessible on the market, and then try to slowly find something suitable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I totally agree. The longer you're here, you find ways to overcome this issue, I think. And, staying somewhere like Sakura House, you're right that there's probably a small premium that you pay over an individual kind of contract directly
Yeah.
with a landlord, but it's a lot easier. Usually there's like less fees and stuff when you move in. So that can be a good hack to just kind of get your foot in the door, live somewhere for a bit, and then get more used to life in Japan and make some more connections and just kind of figure out how to go about getting your next place. So it's definitely a stumbling block. It's unfortunate that there are some like limitations, like you said, but people find a way around that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm glad to hear that that wasn't too big of an issue for you either.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I,
I
I
mean,
I moved many times actually between different places, but it was interesting, right? I've been living in Saitama, Kawaguchi for a year or two. Yeah, that was good experience. Even it wasn't Tokyo, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I actually would like to experience like living more in like rural Japan. Tokyo is great, but I really love the seaside. So if I can somehow someday live there, I will probably try it.
That sounds like a pretty good plan, actually. I think I've dreamed about that myself. I think most of us in in Tokyo probably have at some point or other, at least fantasized about that kind of seaside life in Japan. So yeah, that's cool. So you'd been here for a while, and I know you didn't have any kind of like deep kind of reason for wanting to be in Japan. It was more like you had your girlfriend and maybe like a little bit of interest, based on like your upbringing and seeing the cartoons and stuff like that. But I guess relative to like kind of your expectations, were you like blown away by like how much you liked actually living in Japan, or was it what you expected, or like what was your reaction to actually living here?
The first few months were pretty tough, and it was like the
Hmm.
massive culture shock.
Really?
Um, yeah, yeah. I remember it was like that. And right now that environment doesn't surprise me anymore that
Mm,
much. I used to that sometimes I can't read anything, right, and don't
mm,
understand what is there. But
mm.
we have technology now. We can use Google Translate pretty easily,
Yeah.
and it works well with camera. So I kind of go around those difficulties. But yeah, at the beginning, the culture shock was pretty strong.
Mm,
Things were very, very different. At that time, it was way before the Olympics, right? So, like on the stations, like Shinjuku Station, there were almost nothing in English, right? So you need to figure out everything from kanji.
mm,
And I had massive difficulties with getting around Shinjuku Station. That I
mm.
remember clearly, that it was very, very hard
Wow.
right then. But then I kind of look at the map many, many times, and I learned how to go around there. Yeah.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
so I think that was the biggest difficulty, right? The language barrier.
I see. Yeah, it's really interesting how that seems to really be an issue for some people. It was for me as well. Like when I arrived, it was a bit of a shock, I would say. Like I would have mail arrive to my place, and I wasn't even in Tokyo. I was in like this rural area in Toyama Prefecture alone, and then I'd get this like letter or whatever from like some government-looking organization, and I wouldn't be able to read a word of it. And I freaked out a little bit when that happened. I was like, what am I doing here? Like I don't know what's going on around me. And I think that gave me a lot of motivation also to study the language.
Hmm.
And I feel like some people are kind of just fine with that. They just go with the flow. It's like, yeah, I can't read any of this stuff, but I can still live my life. I can still get around. People are incredibly accommodating. If you just even talk to them in English or whatever, you can figure out any problem.
Hmm.
And it's true. You definitely can. You don't need Japanese. But I also had like a similar, I think, reaction to you though, where it was like, oh my gosh, like I can't understand the word, like the world around me,
Yeah, and the biggest
So,
challenge probably on the beginning, like when you stay a little bit longer here, like how to do
mm,
your taxes, right?
uh,
That's kind of
yeah.
scary. It's a
Hmm.
big topic. And I had also like experience one time opening Japanese kabushiki gaisha, right?
Mm,
So that was really tough. But I did it. Later I suspended that company because like the overhead, like in terms of like bureaucracy around that, it was just too much. Like
wow.
with having company, I have other company in Europe,
Mm,
and I don't experience such problems like I had here, right?
mm, mm.
So for that reason, Japanese company needed to be suspended.
Wow. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that actually. So you decided to make a kabushiki gaisha, like a KK,
Mhm.
start a Japanese corporation, essentially, is what
Yeah.
that is. And what was the reasoning behind initially creating the company? Was it for your side projects or your freelance work as an engineer, or what was actually the plan?
Mostly freelance work. I wanted to have a reputable company which could deal with Japanese companies, right? But for many
Right.
reasons, it wasn't a very good idea because, like I said, the like overhead is quite big, I would
Mm,
say.
mm,
Accounting costs are, if you don't do it yourself, are pretty high. You basically needs to count like your pay premium that they treat you in English, right?
mm, mm.
The taxes itself also not the cheapest one, especially like the health insurance if you need to pay everything yourself. If someone wants to start a company here, I recommend with all my heart just the private, not private,
Sole
the
proprietorship.
yes, exactly. So
Yeah,
if you do that, the overhead is minimal and you just do the taxes once a year like you usually would do. So yeah, that's a much better way to do things.
totally agree. At a certain point with like your revenue and everything, you'll hit a point where, as a sole proprietor slash kojin jigyo, it's called in
Hmm.
Japanese, it won't really make sense anymore because the tax rate gets too high and things like that. But up until then, I wholeheartedly agree. You should just keep it as a sole proprietorship for as long as you can
Hmm.
because it is so much simpler.
Yes.
As someone who's also made a KK, and thankfully I had my wife, my co-founder as well. She's a native speaker of Japanese, so that helped a heck of a lot. I don't know that I literally could have done it on my own, probably not. But even so, as you mentioned, there's a lot of complexity that comes with having a KK. Like there's
Yeah.
essentially like a monthly retainer that you need to be paying for an accountant so that you can ask
Plus
them
office.
questions. Yeah, and you need, well, depending on what you're trying to do, and if you want to try to get a visa through it and stuff like that, there's a lot of extra stuff that you would need as well. Potentially even like some minimum investments in capital and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And obviously the Kessan, like the, I guess, end of year reporting processes and stuff are quite complex and also quite costly. So it's a significant investment, both in terms of time and money,
Yeah.
to start running a KK. I think it's also kind of an open question of how much legitimacy it lends to your company to be a KK. Whether you could just do a GK, which is a little bit simpler, or just keep it a sole proprietorship. I was not totally clear, and I wanted a KK just to kind of maximize the chances that my clients and companies would kind of see us as legitimate, but I don't
Exactly.
actually
Right.
know. Right.
Yeah.
But it's impossible. It's so hard to say how much that actually impacts anything, right?
I think to
So,
some degree they prefer to deal with Japanese companies, right?
mm-hmm.
Whether the owner is a foreigner or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has impact, especially if you do business with like bigger corporations and stuff like that. In your case, yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. In my case, at that time where I have just the bunch of small freelance clients, it didn't really matter. So
Right.
it was a bit of overhead, and I had bigger plans, but reality verified that it's okay, right? Learning experience.
Yeah. I think it's smart that you were able to try it and then look at it objectively and say, you know what, I actually don't think that I need this, and just close it and
Yeah.
get rid of all of that kind of complexity. So, are you still doing freelance work now? Because I know you have a couple of side projects slash now, I guess they're becoming kind of your main business that you're focused on pretty much full time. So, I want to talk about those as well. But are you still doing any freelance or no?
I basically stopped freelancing a few months ago. Well, after closing this Japanese company, I found a full-time job for one of Mitsubishi companies, right?
Okay.
They have a lot of different stuff, and it was actually a very good decision at that time.
Hmm.
It gave me some stability and helped me to grow my skills in few interesting areas. So there I went from being like a software engineer, front-end engineer to being team lead and then engineering manager, right? So
I see.
that was very good experience. My direct boss, he was American. I learned a lot from him, and I'm really grateful he gave me a chance to do this transition.
Hmm.
At the same time, when you become engineering manager, after I finished working for that company, it's very hard to find some other engineering manager position which only required English as a main language. That kind of was good and bad for my
Hmm.
situation. After I finished working for that company, I had my side projects, let's say, for already a few years, and I was trying to find new job as engineering manager because I didn't wanted to really go back to like software engineer kind of position,
Hmm.
and it proved to be very challenging, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
For different reasons. I think if I would have at least N3 or N2
Hmm.
certificate and like be more fluent in Japanese, that would be okay.
Hmm.
I think there is enough like work on the market. I could find something, but at the same time, my side projects started to take off because I
Hmm.
had more time. I focused a little bit more after finishing work for that company, and I started to get some like good revenue from those,
Hmm.
right? Because of that, I wasn't really like 100% focused on finding new job.
Right.
And after half year, I said just okay, that's enough. Like it's not going to happen. I'm really more happy if I see my company grow, and
Hmm.
I need to focus 100%. And yeah,
That's cool. So you made the switch to engineering manager. I
yes.
know that is a very different job than being a software engineer. And you decided that you liked that better, though, or at least at this point in your career, you were past the point where you wanted to be like an individual contributor, just
Hmm.
writing code, and you wanted to be like managing people and a team essentially. And you didn't feel like there were any kind of downsides to that. I mean, I did the similar transition, and I felt like I was really glad that I did it, and I did it for about 2 years or so. But
Hmm.
I think I kind of realized actually that it wasn't for me long term. I think, and
Hmm.
when I looked at the people above me and like their position, and asked myself like, do I actually want their job? Like, do I want to be a director next and whatever after that? Like, I don't really feel like that was the right fit. And I was actually thinking about potentially even trying to move back to like software engineering, just because, like you said, they're very different positions. But you felt like the management side was maybe a better fit for you, you think?
On the beginning, yes, but it's just early excitement about doing something different. But then the reality hits, and you wake up with your calendar when you have maybe 15 minutes to eat your lunch, and otherwise you are on the call all the time. So there were days like that, and definitely in those kind of situations, you are thinking, "Oh, I wish I was like individual contributor again," because I really don't enjoy being in the call like all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I had such realizations as well.
I see.
Like there are good and bad sides for both positions. Like
Mm,
right now, I really enjoy both aspects, but
mm.
like when you run your own company, you have so many more other things to do, things
Yeah.
you sometimes don't enjoy but need to do, right? Like
Right.
invoicing,
Yes. Yes.
stuff like that. Yeah, I think for me, it was very good. I experienced that. And I'm
Mm,
very glad I did, because now when I need to hire people myself, I have more confidence in like how things should be handled and what can go wrong, right?
mm.
And how to handle those more difficult situations. So that really helped me to see the other side, right, of the company, of the work.
That's really interesting. And it mirrors my own experience very well. I was a software engineer, did the engineering manager thing for about 2 years, and then started my own business. And I feel like it's a perfect way to prepare for going from being just an engineer to running a business,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like in between the two. You have to do
Mhm.
some management, you have to think about the business itself a bit more rather than just being off in your own world, building the features, and you get the spec or whatever from the product managers and you just build it, rather than like as an engineering manager you have to be talking to other teams and actually think about the business model, right, and how you make
Yeah,
money and things like
wider
that.
picture, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
So I thought it prepared me extremely well. So it's interesting that you kind of made those same steps and have now been able also to switch over to just running your own business full time. So I do want to talk more about the business actually. So let's actually talk a little bit more about that. So Remote Index is your job board
Yes.
that you have for remote jobs. And tell me a little bit about how that kind of got started, how it works, what your kind of goals were with that project.
Well, it started with different name and in around 2017, actually,
Hmm.
when I
Wow.
first started the company back in Estonia. I got really fascinated by the concept of Estonian residency, and I was like supporting this concept from the very beginning. I think
Hmm.
it's awesome, and they did extremely good job with that. So I opened company there, and I started like general job board. First, it was called Timingu, Japanized name, and
Right.
I hired some people to help me build it. We built it, and then we started getting some traffic from Google, and then one day the Google traffic stopped completely, and I
See.
needed to tell the whole team, "Sorry guys, but there is nothing left we can do." At that time, running the ads was out of question. That the costs were pretty high.
Hmm.
Just, there was no way to continue that project, and we didn't have investor. It was all bootstrapped.
Hmm.
So I kept that company. I kept the source code. The website
Hmm.
was running for maybe 1 year more, but like without any change. And then I worked with those different companies. Then around COVID, when COVID started, I thought like, okay, as a side project, I will rebuild that and make it a remote job board, right? And
Uh,
then I started Remote Index. It had like different name on the beginning, which was really bad. And then I changed the name to Remote Index. Later, I also acquired .com domain. But yeah, that idea of doing remote job board was partially coming from the guy called Peter Levels. I think you also
okay.
heard about him, or like
Yeah,
follow
of
him.
course. Legendary indie hacker.
Yeah, the way he did it, and I think it also was a problem for him also recently, that the Google
Hmm.
also cut the traffic to his website as well for some reasons. I don't know why. I didn't follow that, but just from what I saw on X, that most of the traffic to Remote OK is down, right? So
Really?
yeah, that can happen to anyone. That was the first inspiration, but as I was building that and thinking like how I can differentiate, because at the time a lot of remote job boards were created and some of them become pretty successful. I was looking like how I can differentiate, how I can bring the people in on the platform, and it wasn't so easy, right? So I was starting to look like, okay, like maybe I can do something a little bit different. And
Mm,
I stumbled on programmatic advertising, and this is basically where I focused all my efforts. That started bringing some income over the years. And recently, after I finished working for this Mitsubishi company, I
mm,
basically focused 100% on that, hired people who already work in that industry,
mm,
learned more, improve, repeat until
mhm,
it started working pretty well. And yeah, now remote index, we are in kind of transition stage where remote index will stay the job board, but all the
mm,
programmatic activity, let's say, will be
mm,
moved to
mm,
applyads.com.
mm,
And this is kind of like new old project because I'm using all the technology which has been built, all the software I built over the years, but
mm.
just packaging it into like separate platform which will serve not only my company but also will enable other companies to programmatic job advertisement.
Wow. So you started out with mainly a focus on using SEO, which I think is
Yeah.
often the primary distribution channel that people will use for job boards. They get
Mhm.
searches through Google to come and then view their site, and people apply to jobs through it. And that's how they make the clients that post jobs happy because there are people coming in. And you tried that, but you're at the mercy of Google when you do that. So you had maybe some issues. Maybe there was a algorithm change or something like that, and you realized, oh wow, they can completely destroy my business if they want to, basically. Uh,
Exactly. That's what
yeah,
happened, right? Like
yeah,
if they wouldn't do that at that point, probably I
mm,
could grow it more and it could grow into like bigger project at that time. But
mm,
it was like, I would say, still cheap lesson to learn at
mm,
that moment than if I would continue and hire more people and were like more invested into that.
right. Wow. But then somewhere along the line, you found this alternate distribution channel of programmatic ads,
Mhm,
where essentially you can create tons of different ads in various channels, I guess, right?
mhm.
And that is another way to basically get your jobs that you have on the platform in front of people. And so you have companies pay to post the job, and then you pay maybe some portion of what they pay you for these advertising
Yes.
platforms to then get some eyeballs on them, and then enough people apply that it makes sense for the companies to keep posting the jobs, and you
Yeah.
are able to kind of arbitrage between those two prices. And that's essentially how the model works now, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's form
Wow.
of arbitration. It's not so easy, I would
Hmm.
say, because you have so much bot traffic in this industry, which
Mm,
is very hard to distinguish from like normal traffic. You had like companies posting their jobs in wrong places or
mm,
doing
mm,
all sort of different dirty tricks to just get the money. So there are some, bad agents, I would say, in that
mm.
industry as well. I wouldn't say more than any other industry, but maybe in that industry it's pretty visible because if you make a mistake, it can be costly very, very fast for you.
Right. So,
Right.
so when you say it's programmatic, you're automatically creating ads and maybe automatically bidding on prices and things like that for the ads.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a maximum that you're willing to pay to show this ad to X amount of people or whatever.
Yes.
So if one of those gets spammed by 1,000 bots all at once, and you agree to pay a certain amount for those views or whatever, and then none of them
Yes.
translate into real applicants, then you've just lost money essentially, right?
Yeah.
So you have to guard against that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. Or that there's the traffic which looks okay, but at the end of the month, client tells you that, but it didn't convert it. But
Mm,
they don't have even integration to give us conversion data,
I
so we don't
see.
know if it converted or it doesn't.
So
You know.
there's a long feedback loop between you
Yes,
sending the traffic and actually finding out if that was valuable or not. Because
yeah,
if it was instantaneous, then it'd be a lot easier to just change those
exactly,
things
exactly.
as you go. But right, that's
This
interesting.
this industry is very different from digital advertisement you see for like banner ads and video with like
Hmm.
RTB real time bidding. It's very different than that. It follows a little bit different rules.
Hmm.
Challenges are in some way similar, but yeah.
That's really cool though, and it sounds like you've been able to carve out a niche in that industry. And so I guess you realized that that was like a potentially a good way to monetize a service like a job board, maybe specifically job boards,
Mhm.
and you realized there was this opportunity to carve out that part of the code into its own product that then you could
Yes.
essentially release and use that skill that you built up from doing it.
Mhm.
And you were like, hey, I could probably help other people do this. There are a lot of job
Yeah.
boards out there. So now you are attempting to essentially sell that as a productized service now to other job board owners. Is that right?
Job board owners, companies, recruitment agencies, right? Whoever
Mm-hmm.
may need quality applicants, right? And traffic for their jobs. Or also like publishers like job boards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who need basically more revenue.
Mm.
If they have good
Right.
traffic, people will keep buying.
So that's called Apply Ads, applyads.com.
Yes.
And so that's your main focus right now is extracting that part from the code that was all
Exactly.
part of remote index and then
Exactly.
productizing it as a separate kind of business.
I think over time, we built a pretty good platform for ourselves. So this is like natural step to make it available for others, especially that in terms of like how efficient it is. I know my competition is using the cloud extensively, and they pay thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for just infrastructure. We are much closer to like bare metal, I would say, and our costs are nowhere compared to what they need to pay.
Awesome.
Also, I don't rent office or keep a big team. So in terms of like how competitive it can be, we can make it very efficient, right? And a lot of the things also inside, I try to automate, use AI as well to do certain things. So, that I don't need to make my team bigger necessarily, but keep the operations smooth.
Right, right. That's cool. So have hired a few people to help out.
Mhm.
Okay, so the team has grown
Yes.
somewhat, but you're trying to limit how big it gets. You don't want to have another situation where like something changes or whatever, and you
Yeah,
have to
exactly. You
let
never
the
know
team go.
what will happen with the industry. We are strongly dependent on US macroeconomic situation, to be honest, because those job offers are coming in big portion from big US companies, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
only US, there's also Europe and other parts of the world, but US is playing the very big role in that, right? So if the economic situation in US is good and those big companies are hiring,
Mm-hmm.
then we can be certain that there will be budgets for hiring and we can get portion of that, right? So there's dependency. Also, like with time, the whole industry is evolving to be like more efficient. So the rates are not necessarily going up because of the increasing optimization and automation, that the rates per hire should be slowly going down actually because it's getting cheaper in many ways to hire. But that industry requires like constant adaptation to the situation.
I say. Cool. So is it running now as a sole proprietorship in Japan?
No, I was keeping the solo proprietorship in Japan only for like freelance, and I still have it. But as I stopped freelancing, I only keep this and the company in Estonia, which is actually handling the business for Apply Ads and Remote Index.
Okay. So you have an Estonian based business. You figured out a way to pay the various taxes that you need to the various countries, given their
Yes,
treaties and everything, and you have an
yes.
accountant probably who can handle that
That
stuff, right?
that required a few visits to the tax office, but yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great tip right there. The tax office people, so helpful in Japan. They will help you figure it out, whatever it is you're trying to do. They've probably seen something like it before, and whatever your level of Japanese or whatever, they will help you basically get to what you need to.
Yeah, even I used Google Translate or something to communicate with them, and they were very very helpful. The only thing which they told me to call some phone number was about some Bitcoin related taxes, which were like insanely complicated. They just
Yeah.
gave up on that one, but that was like unique situation, and I absolutely don't blame them because how can they know? It's so like
Mm,
very very niche topic. So
mm. Right. So these days, what are you doing visa wise? Did you get permanent residency?
not yet. I'm
Oh,
currently
okay.
on spouse visa.
Okay, so you're on a spouse visa. It's not an option for everyone, obviously, but if it is, it's a great visa to get. There's like no limitation, pretty much. You can switch it to PR pretty easily at some point if
Yeah.
you decide to.
I
Yeah.
think there are more options. Like the startup visa got better. I think
Yeah.
you have like 2 years right now where you first year you don't even need to start a company. It got like really reasonable right now in those terms.
Yeah, I heard they're updating it. I think the initial version was basically just for 1 year, and maybe you could renew it for a second year or something like that. But I think the initial length was only 1 year, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly. And there were a lot of hoops that you kind of needed to jump through. You needed to have like a business plan and get that
Yeah.
approved and stuff like that. And it's like at that point, maybe you would just want to actually start the business and get business investor visa or one of those instead. But it does buy you time at the very least. And it does sound like they're extending it and making it maybe a little bit easier to get and things like that. In which case, I think it could be a pretty good option. So at least, it's an option that didn't used to exist, but now it does. And if you already have more of an established company with revenue and things like that, I would look into the investor visa as well. But yeah, I think there are some options these days. I agree for
Yeah.
business owners.
I
Yeah.
remember a few months ago there was some case explained, like one person complained on LinkedIn about
Mm.
that the process of renewing those startup visa was like problematic, let's say. But I think from that time it changed a little bit, or at
Mm.
least
Yeah,
I hope.
I hope so. We'll see. But I think it's clear that they're making efforts to
Hmm.
make it a bit easier. Obviously, there's the highly skilled professional point system now that makes it a lot easier to get
Yeah.
permanent residency a lot faster and things like that as well. So I think that's the clear kind of trend toward making it easier, not harder for people to start businesses here.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. And ultimately, yeah, of course, I would like to do a permanent residency. That makes life a little bit easier, right?
Mm-hmm. It's nice. I mean, spouse visa is pretty stable as well. I was on highly skilled professional visa, and it always kind of felt like my ability to be in the country was like conditional upon me continuing
Hmm.
to like work and be at, especially with the HSP visa, like a specific company, in fact. So I didn't
Hmm.
really like that, and it felt very freeing to just get the permanent residency. And it's like, okay, I have to update this card every 7 years, but that's literally it. Never have to go to immigration for any reason except that
Right.
now,
Right.
Yeah. So
Funny
that was very
story
nice.
about immigration. Recently,
Mm.
I visited immigration office, and 3 years ago there was like crazy line in front of the building, and like going around the
Yes.
corner and stuff like that. This
Hmm.
time I came and there was no line, and I said, okay, maybe it's closed today. Maybe I forgot there is some public holidays. Actually, no, like they move part of the process to be done online now, and I just didn't know. So
I see.
not enough research before coming. But yeah, that's a great news that Japan also is improving those internal processes, especially for handing visa and like extending the visa for people who are staying here like longer time, who has
Yeah.
families. That was really needed. So yeah, I'm happy that this country is improving in that way.
Yeah, me too. So I guess you think that for the time being, you will be continuing to focus full time on your businesses, and you have the Estonian company set up, so it's not fully like based here exactly, but you are. And you think you'll continue to kind of run that from Japan and try to grow it? Is that the plan for the next couple of years or whatever?
Exactly. I'm thinking also about opening one more company,
Okay.
either in Singapore or US, just to have alternative, because like
Hmm.
the world situation is not exactly stable right now. So just to have some options, right? Japan also could be an option, but this overhead kind of scares me off, to be honest. So as my family can be really based in Japan, or we can go to different country, I prefer to have like a little bit flexibility about
Right.
that. But yeah, in general, yeah, I'm want to continue to work on remote index, apply ads, and grow it. Yeah.
Hmm. I say. Yeah, I guess Singapore could be interesting. It's close enough where like you could physically go in a pinch if you had to and maybe do some stuff there. And I guess you could pretty much do all that in English, right?
Yeah, those
Where
are like massive benefits, and there are some
yeah,
like good laws around
yeah.
those companies, right? It's not like tax paradise or anything like that, so
Right,
you
right.
can have like normal reputable company.
Exactly. Yeah. But it has like a reasonable capital gains tax rate and all that kind of stuff. It's on the low side, but it's not like
Yeah,
suspicious, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. That's cool. Yes, I mean, you've been in Japan for like a decade now. You think you'll be here for another decade? Like, are you pretty much stuck here, do you think? Or what's your plan? Or I guess your thinking regarding that?
Well, right now we are at the stage of choosing like education path for schools for our children, right?
Hmm.
So I would like them to experience different cultures, not only stay like all their like young life in Japan. Japan is great,
Hmm.
but one of the things which I think some of the people here should experience is actually living abroad, just to widen their horizons. And I want that the same thing for my children. So
Okay.
we are considering different locations to do that.
Mm.
Maybe also spend some time in Europe. Besides, like general opinion that Europe is on down course and it's very bad there. It's not.
Okay.
The life can be very very comfortable there as well. So like that's one of the options. I was thinking also about Spain, right?
Mm, mm,
I know the language like on
mm,
the okay level, so it would
mm,
be easier to just stay there for a year or two.
okay.
Yeah, there are many options. So right now, yeah, main focus on Japan, but we are considering options to go somewhere in the near future.
Mm, I say at least for like a year or two to really,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, give your kids more of the international upbringing, expose them to
Yeah.
some other cultures, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Have you ever thought about trying to have Japan as like a home base and then maybe do like the summers somewhere else or something like that? Is that something you're looking into as well?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good concept, especially like knowing how the Tokyo summers look like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great to spend some time in different climate. So yeah, that's definitely an option, especially when they are older, thinking about having some summer vacation in Poland or different
Right.
places. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess you're like fairly insulated from the actual tech scene industry in Japan since your business is more global. Like you said, like it's a little bit more focused on like the US, Europe, places like that. So I guess it doesn't directly impact you as much. If Tokyo becomes like more of a startup hub or if it maybe declines, I guess you're insulated from that. But do you have any kind of thoughts on like where you see Tokyo going? Maybe a destination for like startups and like the tech industry? How do you think about that?
In last few months, I see like when I was looking for work a few months
Hmm.
ago, it wasn't looking very good because there was
Really?
like this series of layoffs in US in big tech companies and the atmosphere was horrible. But now I see the hiring is coming back with COVID levels, I would say even, right? So
Mm-hmm.
much more companies are hiring. I think that Tokyo has ambition to be like startup hub, like global startup hub. And I think it could be done, but it will take some time to make it happen. There
I
are
see.
some wise people working on that, and there are some interesting conferences which are happening here,
Yeah.
like I think Take Off Tokyo, right? This is
Yeah.
from some people I know, and they're doing extremely good job with that, and I think it will just grow.
Mhm.
That they don't have like big competition, to be honest, and they are very professional in that. So I think if those different factors keep aligning,
Mhm.
there's a big chance that Tokyo will become like the startup center for this part of Asia. I think
I
it's
hope so.
becoming very popular for like digital nomads. The prices are very reasonable, I think,
Mhm.
right now,
Mhm.
especially with pretty weak yen. So there's like a lot of good conditions meeting together to make it happen.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of people want to at least try living in Japan for a while, and I think there's a pretty good amount of overlap between tech people and the people
Hmm.
interested in Japan for whatever reason. I'm not 100% sure why that is, but I think it's a Venn diagram with quite a large area of overlap. So I
Hmm.
feel like there's a lot of potential. I think the biggest thing is probably the language
Yeah,
barrier.
yeah. And
Yeah.
like I think if someone is considering that move, they should try.
Mm.
Of course, like if they don't have any other option, like
Mm.
if their money run out or something like that, and that they will have like no resources to come back to their country, that of
Mm.
course is not good thing to do. But in most cases, we have family, and hopefully for most people that won't be the case. So it's great experience to come here to learn different culture, see how things can be done differently than at home, right? And
Mm. Mm.
see that it can work very well and the society can be very happy even
Mm.
in
Mm.
those different settings, right?
Yeah.
By no means Japan is not perfect, but it's a great place to be.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I would say that in the back of my mind, like I know that the population is declining and there are these kind of societal looming, I guess, issues that Japan
Hmm.
is going to face at some point. But living in Tokyo, it really doesn't feel like that's the case. You know, there are so many young people around, I guess because people congregate here, right? People come for jobs and stuff that like
Hmm.
you don't notice that day to day just living here. I guess I am curious if that's on your mind though, as like a father, when it comes to like thinking about I guess the paths that you want to have your kids following and things like that. Are you at all concerned about the declining population here in Japan, and is that part of like your decision making when it comes to like where you want to be long term and stuff like that?
I think like I'm more worried about my retirement. because that may be problematic with Japanese pension system. But I
Right.
still hope it won't be that bad with all the automation in
Yeah.
all industries right now. It can play pretty okay.
Yeah.
Um, for my children, well, I want them to have options, right? Like they will
Hmm.
have two passports, so
Hmm.
they can really choose and see which part of the world is better for them, right?
Right.
Just give them options and let them choose. I can decide for them.
Right. Of course. Okay. I see. You just want to give them the tools to make their own kind of
Yeah,
decisions, make an informed decision, I guess, right?
yeah,
That makes sense. I mean, it's really fascinating to kind of see what happens with the business. I feel like as a job board owner myself, I want to kind of learn more about the stuff that you're doing. The programmatic ad type industry is not something that I've looked into that much myself. So like I'm super interested to kind of learn more about that and see how things go with apply ads as well. So it looks seems like a really cool business. I don't know, I guess lastly, like, do you have any advice for someone who kind of wants to maybe follow in your footsteps? You know, if they're living overseas, they want to get to Japan, kind of start their careers as a software engineer here, and maybe are interested in doing similar things that you've done.
I wouldn't advise to do exactly as I did because I made like so many mistakes. But if I could say something who is considering that, learn as much Japanese as you can wherever you are, right?
Mm,
And then have a good skill and portfolio, and have enough money to survive at least half year, not
mm,
let's say 3 months or something like that,
right, right.
and enough to buy ticket home in the worst situation, right? So like preparation, right? Just
Mm, mm,
common sense preparation for what you want to do,
mm,
especially in Japan. That's necessary. This
right.
country can be extremely rewarding, but it kind of pays for people who prepare themselves, right, and
Interesting.
work hard. Yeah,
Okay. I think that's great advice. You know, be able to kind of hit the ground running, whether it's the language or your tech skills, and have the tools that you need to really, get the job search underway when you arrive. Awesome. Is there anywhere that people can go to kind of, I guess, learn more about you, if, online, social media or anything like that?
I'm on X and I'm on LinkedIn, so
Oh,
maybe I can share those links with you, and we could leave it
okay.
under in the description.
All right. So we will
Plus
share
my two websites, Remote Index and Apply Ads.
okay. So remoteindex.com and applyads.com, right?
Yes.
Cool. All right. And we'll add links to those and your social media profiles in the description. Thank you so much again for the discussion. It was really interesting to learn more about kind of your journey here in Japan.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation. It was great.
And then just one last thing, if you did get some value out of this discussion, please do go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We're going to continue to do more interviews with software engineers in Japan like Kamil. Also, if you want to leave a comment, we will absolutely see that and we will absolutely appreciate it as well. So like, comment, subscribe, all the things you can do to kind of show that you appreciate this show. We will be extremely glad to see it, and it'll let us know that we're on the right track and we should be doing more episodes like this. So thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.